welcome to another episode of the Who Dat Jedi podcast. I'm Aaron, and with me as always is Dave and Fredo, the rest of the Who Dat Jedi Council. How you doing, guys?
Hello.
Not just the rest of the Who Dat Jedi Council. MVPs, right?
Well, I don't know. I suppose if we're all MVPs, then it just, I guess, yeah. But yeah, we don't have but we said everybody else who listens to this, aren't they like just they're Jedi Who Dat Jedi Knights, right?
Yeah, I think we've got the council, we got the knights.
They're the Kniggets.
And somebody's going to sue us eventually. So we got so funny story actually. The job that I had with the startup that was out of Canada, we developed a interactive training for Google Apps at that point. I'm dating myself. It was Google Apps. Anyway, so there was there's a blog called the Google Guru, and they do all the breaking news when Google releases an update or something like that. And so I was in charge of our blog. And so they're like, Aaron, you need to have like some sort of persona. So they called me the Google Jedi. And actually I've got, if you see my Twitter profile, that's the little thing my friend Kevin drew up of me as the Google Jedi. And so we went for a while, and it was like, we had that was on our blog and everything like that. And then when all of a sudden just one day, and this kind of led to when the company was acquired by Google. But at one point my boss said, yeah, we need to stop with the Google Jedi. So it's just kind of, and I was like, I just remember that line from Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. George Lucas gonna sue somebody. So
Yep.
the Google lawyers must not have liked that, taking that property into their midst. They didn't want to deal with that. So anyway, but I still have the drawing, and I will use it. Yeah.
So does that make the boss the Google Sith Lord? Since he took out the Jedi?
I suppose it could be. So, but we'll just move on from that one. All right. So the Saints are on a bye week. So I don't have anything to talk about except big news is that finally Will Lutz is off IR. Please, oh Lord, let him be healthy and let him be able to kick a ball, because nobody else in the 504 area code can.
Well, it's not that we can't kick a ball. It's a question we can't kick a ball accurately.
Yeah.
It's putting it between the two big yellow poles that sit at the ends of the end zones. Everybody can kick it. It's just, can you put it between those two, in the space between them?
By the way, you turned me on to this, Fredo. I've now been listening to I've been listening to the Who Dat Jedi podcast. I've been listening to the Saints Happy Hour podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Very entertaining, podcast. But they asked a question. I'm going to ask it to you guys. So here we are at the bye. Who is the MVP of the Saints so far
this season?
Yeah. Here at the bye, who's your MVP so far?
I'd probably go with Demario Davis, just because he's the easiest name to kind of just pick out, and because his presence on defense, when it's good, you notice. When we're not good, you notice his absence.
Dave, what do you think? Who's your MVP?
I'll probably take Lattimore.
That's one I was going to go with. Lattimore is, he actually started off kind of slow, I thought, and then he's really just been on fire.
Yeah, you're constantly seeing that guy making plays, and there was at one point where, like, I think it was Washington, like their entire offense seemed to be like designed at going at Lattimore, which just seems like the worst possible strategy. So it was like, yes, okay, continue to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, it was the one receiver I think that they had. So, but it also has proved so far. I think this has proven that Sean Payton is a coach. That here you got a different quarterback, kind of different makeup. You got a bunch of people, hurt. If we had any, and they were mentioning this on the Saints Happy Hour podcast, so I don't want to totally steal their thunder, but it's true, and I've thought it before too. It's that, if we had any other coach, we would be just miserable right now. So,
probably fair, but the older I get, the more I realize that I can be my own worst enemy. I feel like most of my wounds nowadays are self-inflicted, and I'm sure if you gave Sean some truth serum, he would say the same thing, because
Oh
it's
yeah.
just like cutting, like, the kicker situation. He cuts the one guy just because he misses the
No,
the 55 yarder or whatever the crap, and so the other guy comes in. So he brings this other guy in who can't hit an extra point, and it's just like, okay, so you made the situation worse.
no, I'm
You
not
know,
calling him. I'm not calling him Jesus, because it's
yeah, yeah.
Fredo, you were right when we were at the game. You said, you have Jameis throw, the pass, and it got called. We got pass interference or something like that, and or
It got
no,
called a hold.
got called a holding, and then so the very next play is the exact same play with Taysom Hill, and you said, no, that's just Sean being cute, and it is. I mean, yeah, he is his own worst enemy from time to time, but like I said, I think he approached this season with, all right, I got to try some different things. That being said, I'm still going to say it. I've said it over and over again. Please, less Taysom to the right, run him to the left every now and again. Can't just be Taysom to the right. That seems the way it always is. So anyway, let's hope that because we got Seattle on Monday Night Football.
We got Monday night in Seattle.
Everybody stay up late. All right, well, Star Wars time here. Let's do some trivia, get our brain wrapped around what we're going to do. By the way, our topic for tonight, a couple weeks ago we did how the prequel trilogy affected how we see the original trilogy, and tonight it's going to be how the sequel trilogy affects how we see the original trilogy. So while you're thinking about that, we'll do some trivia here. I don't have my glasses. I always forget my glasses, so I'll hold them out far like this. All right, Fredo. I was going to make up something stupid because you got a softball last week. No, I'm going to read the one I'm seeing. Who assumes full responsibility for losing track of the Falcon and then apologizes to Lord Vader?
Captain Nita.
That's one of those lines you always remember. Apology accepted, Captain Nita.
Apology accepted, Captain Nita.
Yep.
I think they say his name like 2-3 times in there. It's like the scene prior is like, where it's like when they lose the side of him, it's like, Captain Nita, we know we can't track him. And they go, Lord Captain Nita, Lord Vader. It's like, it's surprising. Usually most Imperial officers don't get a name drop.
Yeah.
Never mind 3.
All right. Dave? Who's holding a data pad in his hand when he first greets Qui-Gon Jinn? I want to think you've gotten this one before. Somebody has. Who's holding a data pad in his hand when he first greets Qui-Gon Jinn?
Oh, man, I don't know.
Don't think about it too hard, Dave.
Anakin?
Very close. It was Watto.
Okay.
It was Watto.
That's an absurd question.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking it's easy, but the action figure, he has a data pad. So,
does he really?
Yeah.
First, I thought it was a protocol droid, but then the image popped in my head of Waddle getting up from the chair with the data pad and fluttering.
All right, so mine. Who answers the door when Obi-Wan Kenobi visits Jango Fett's apartment?
Okay, come on.
That is going to be Boba Fett. It is Boba Fett.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I got to thinking about this yesterday. I was driving. Who is Obi-Wan in your brain? Ewan McGregor or Alec Guinness? If you had to answer just right away, who's it going to be?
Ewan McGregor.
See, I'd say Alec Guinness.
No, Alec Guinness is Ben Kenobi.
I thought there was okay, so I just want to use this as an opportunity to express this thought that I just had. I thought that there was a slight disconnect between the two. I always did. They're not exactly the same. And they did a good job styling him in Revenge of the Sith to try to connect them further. I thought they did a good job with that, but they never really connected in my brain until we got twin sons in Rebels.
See, and I
And
I would agree.
that,
I would agree with that. Keep going.
yeah, that moment and those scenes with a more Alec Guinness like figure for me really sort of connected the two versions way better than they had been before. And I'm curious to see if the new series does a little bit of that as well.
So nothing bad to James Arnold Taylor, but his voice in the Clone Wars for Obi-Wan has always driven me nuts. It's never he's trying to I don't know if he's trying to be the mixture of Alec Guinness and Ewan McGregor. I don't know, but I'd never liked that vocal portrayal. Like I said, with all due respect, but yeah, I think it was Stephen Stanton did Obi-Wan in Twin Sons and Rebels. Is that who did it? Was Stephen Stanton?
I think you're right.
Somebody, if I'm wrong, somebody check me on Twitter, whatever. But yeah, nailed the Alec Guinness voice. And I can give a little bit of a pass. With it's like, yeah, he's 20 years younger. If you heard my voice, 20 years ago, but no, I was just wondering. It's like when it's funny because the paradigm. It's like when you say Obi-Wan Kenobi or Ben Kenobi, I don't care. I think Alec Guinness. I still think that Ewan McGregor is just kind of, I'm not going to say a fraud, but he's like a stand-in. he's just a stand-in, but he's actually been associated with that character longer.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of weird. And I guess it's old guy. It's like to some people, the quarterback of the Saints is still Bobby Hebert. I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's funny because I saw this meme, I want to say, in Instagram, and it was a juxtaposition of, they want us to think, they show you a picture of Ewan McGregor in 2005 and how he looks now is the same thing as Obi-Wan and Revenge of the Sith, and then Alec Guinness, and you can totally see it's like, wait, this is longer time than this, but he looks way older here, and you're like, maybe desert living, dries you out, makes you older quicker.
I think for me, it's Ewan. I thought he took that role over in Attack of the Clones in particular. At that point, I thought like, okay, this is his role.
Well, he certainly gets more screen time than Alec Guinness.
Yeah, I mean exactly.
Yeah.
And it was
but
just
also,
like, okay, it's him now.
But I also think it's between the prequels and the Clone Wars particularly, we've gotten to know a lot more of Obi-Wan than we ever did his character under Sir Alec Guinness, just because he's got some small role in A New Hope and then a few appearances in the other two movies, whereas he's front and center in the prequels and front and center in Clone Wars. So it's, you're gonna know more about him as this.
I just found it very interesting that was my first thought, and I was like, well, that's not really fair because, like I said, Ben Kenobi is in, just a fraction of each of the three movies of the original trilogy. Yet I see Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan, and Ewan McGregor is, like I said, the stand-in. But he, I don't know. That's just interesting, man. I didn't mean to throw that on you. It was just a random thought from Aaron. So anyway, all right. So Fredo, what else we got going in the news?
So just right quick, actually bringing it back to Boba Fett, though, a big bit of Star Wars news is we got confirmation that Disney Plus Day is going to give us a Boba Fett special titled Under the Helmet, The Legacy of Boba Fett. So this was part of a Disney Gallery series similar in nature to the Disney Gallery Season 1 of Mandalorian, as well as to the final episode of Mandalorian Season 2. It's supposed to be a special that celebrates the origins and legacy of Star Wars' legendary bounty hunter, Boba Fett. And obviously it's going to start out from his, holiday special beginnings all the way through, hopefully leading us into the Book of Boba Fett. See, and that's November 12th.
See, and I want to find out who designed Boba Fett.
Boba Fett? Boba Fett? Where?
because that person like hit gold. Because that's the whole thing, is that the only reason we've talked about it on the show before is that the only reason why Boba Fett was popular is because he looked so damn cool. It was the coolest thing that we had seen in Star Wars to that point. I mean, Darth Vader was really cool, but then you see Boba Fett and it's just like, that looks awesome. Has very few lines, does very little, but by God, it was awesome. So that's all just design. It's like a band gets up on stage, doesn't even play a note, but you look at them and you're like, I want to watch this band just because of the way they look, you know, and it might be awesome, might suck, but it's just like something about them, their stage presence or whatever. It's like, all right, I'm in. So
I think that I mean, we've talked about how he's drawn people in for such a long time, but just because of the general look of the character. We didn't know anything else about him, and so the look was what got people going. And what I find kind of cool is how they riffed on his traditional look in The Mandalorian, where they gave him kind of the desert robes, as part of, I guess he was with Tuscans at some point. We still don't know that full story.
it almost made it look like he was wearing a kilt with the armor. I mean, it was like,
yeah.
I would have been down with that, but anyway.
I think it was really smart because Tamora Morrison is bigger than Jeremy Bulloch was, I think, and so like the armor didn't fit him the same way, or it would have been noticeably larger. You know, there would have been.
It's all that blue milk and bantha, you know, that he's been
too
eating.
much blue milk, man, every time.
Look, 20 plus years, we don't know fit the same clothes we used to.
I think it was an elegant solution, though, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, I agree with you. I think it is cool. Yeah. So it'll be interesting, though, to see if they continue on with that in the Book of Boba Fett, or if they, you know, because, I mean, they even changed, he did a paint job on the armor, you know, in between episodes. So maybe they'll ease us into something that is kind of a marriage of everything. But I was not opposed to what he was wearing. And it also made him stand out from Din.
And from Bo-Katan and the other Night Owls.
Mm-hmm. By the way, on a tangent,
they all have shiny look.
I don't know if I said this to you guys, but at the St. Tammany convention, I was talking to the Mandalorian Mercs, the guy who was running their table. That's another costuming organization. You know, we have the 501st, which are Imperials. We have you have the Rebel Legion, and then you have the Mandalorian Mercs. And I said, so have you guys seen an uptick in membership since the Mandalorian? He's like, no. He said, we see more interest, but the bigger thing is that we're not all Boba Fett anymore. That every time, you know, everybody makes their armor to be their own. It's kind of an interesting concept. They're not trying to be Bo-Katan. They're not trying to be Sabine, you know, or anything. They make their own armor in that style of Mandalorian, but everybody saw them, they were like, Boba Fett. And now he said when they're doing parades and stuff like that, people are like, oh, it's Mandalorians. And they pluralize it. So people are becoming educated on what Mandalorian is versus Boba Fett. So that's just kind of interesting.
As long as they're all expecting baby Grogu's everywhere. So we'll top off Star Wars for a bit, but this might tangentially get back us into Star Wars. There was a big article on Variety about Disney delaying a whole slew of movies, primarily within the MCU, and one that isn't. So Disney has delayed release plans from several upcoming films, including Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which was supposed to come out next March. Now it's coming out in May. Thor: Love and Thunder, which is now going from May to July. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, which is going from July to November. And then that's also pushed a number of other movies into 2023. Along with the Marvel delays, Disney also moved Indiana Jones 5, the installment is currently filming, from June 30th, actually from July 29th of next year to June 30th of 2023. So apparently there was a massive date shuffle related to the success of Shang-Chi, coming Eternals. There was an injury that Harrison Ford sustained on set. So They're doing shoots around without Harrison Ford.
I also think, and again, say this is the cynical Aaron, but I also think that they're sitting there going, there's a possibility of a strike in the movie industry, so we need to pad some things just in case. They're probably, getting word that, production's going to be shut down. I saw an article that production might get shut down on The Mandalorian season 3 because of this impending strike. So, I mean, but they're not going to get out. They're not going to call Variety and say, "Hey, we have to push things because of the, because then that's gonna screw over, any sort of negotiations or anything." But that's the cynical me just saying that's probably what's going on. I mean, I don't know. Did Shang-Chi really do gangbusters, and so they've got to push? But that means they got to push everything back. I mean,
probably not. Probably not. I mean, the one catch I will add is, the way that it impacts back into Star Wars is, remember, we got Rogue Squadron currently scheduled for December 2023. And while it's not necessarily in the same universe as Marvel, then Disney does not like to put competing properties too close to one another.
So I wonder if Endgame and Solo. I mean,
and what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, they've
learned their lessons.
Well, late if they had it already scheduled to do one thing, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh crap, look at this." So I don't know. Dave, what do you think?
I mean, better to delay than try to force the issue, which is the thing we always talk about.
Force.
We all thought that Rise of Skywalker was perhaps rushed. We thought that it was probably to the film's detriment, and so just from that perspective alone, I don't get too hung up on these things, especially because of the volume aspect of it. There's just so many of these movies. It's like, oh no, I'm not going to get my Marvel fix for another 2 months. Well, there's one coming 2 months later, so it's okay. It's a little different with Star Wars because, like Fredo was saying, I've got to wait until 2023 right now. And so I think if they push that one back, I'll feel a little more disappointed.
Now, can Harrison Ford do a Star Wars or indie movie and not get hurt, please?
I think it's in his contract.
Yeah, I mean, but I don't know what to expect for Indy 5, but I guess, but we have another story about Indy 5.
Well, there's one thing you can expect, and that is you will hear John Williams' music in Indy 5. So it was confirmed that the one and only John Williams will start writing music for Indiana Jones 5 in a couple of weeks, according to reports from fans who attended one of his 3 concerts in Berlin. Although you're more likely going to have to wait, at the time they said next summer, but more likely it's going to be further out. And it kind of shows when this story broke, it was still on schedule for next year. But he does say he never knows what Spielberg's doing next, and that Indy 5 is changing by the second. Remember, this movie, Indy 5, it's not Steven Spielberg directing, he's producing. He's got Logan and Ford versus Ferrari director James Mangold directing it. So at least they're trying to keep the continuity of that. And we know that John Williams has retired from Star Wars music, but not entirely out of Lucasfilm altogether.
Yeah, I mean, boy, and I used to be of the mindset that if it ain't going to be John Williams, that there should be somebody who is right now working with John Williams to learn how to compose like John Williams. But The Mandalorian and The Mandalorian really has, and Rogue One, except for the main title, has proven to me that and actually even Clone Wars has some really good soundtrack to it. Mm-hmm. So, I used to be a big John Williams homer, and I as long as he is alive, I hope he keeps composing, and then when he dies, he can decompose. And but I could tell a joke, but anyway, I just did. But anyway, no, I mean,
is that what we're calling it?
I want him to keep composing. But the future is bright. And I think some of these series have, they've again, they've taken me along and saying it's going to be okay. So I think it was good that they had somebody else composing for Clone Wars, somebody else composing for Solo and for, Mandalorian, stuff like that. So yeah. I tell you what, if there's one guy that I'd probably bawl when I met, it would be John Williams. So
probably the same. Yeah. And it'd be, we're not even going to speak the evil of him passing on into existence, because that just...
You've seen the YouTube clip of kids playing the Star Wars theme outside of his house?
No.
I'll send you guys a clip. But two kids playing like their trumpets outside of his house, playing like Star Wars theme, and he comes out of the house and starts working with the kids there on the sidewalk. Just give them a little mini lesson. I mean, it's like...
That's awesome.
First of all, can you imagine being in the same neighborhood with John Williams and then, having the balls to go play your trumpet outside of his...
He comes outside. You're doing it wrong.
Get off my lawn.
Yeah. Where's Aaron again? Is he over at John Williams' house again? No, but I think you can speak to a larger point, which is he's so integral to the fabric and the feel of the movies that he's made, particularly the big franchise. I mean, it's not just Star Wars or Indiana Jones, it's Harry Potter, there's E.T. I mean, there's a lot of stuff where John Williams is...
Harry Williams is his dad.
Yeah, that's right. He's the one telling you to get off his lawn. No, his influence is felt, and he's built the musical language to it. So glad to hear he's at least coming back for that. Last bit of news, and it'll be a quick one. Going back to Marvel right quick, they announced that their next Disney Plus series, Hawkeye, is going to come out on November 24th. So you'll get to have your first 2 episodes alongside some Thanksgiving turkey.
This looks good.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why, but it's like the whole having it being set around Christmas, like, just makes me even a little bit more giddy for it. I don't know. Just seeing this.
Did they hire Shane Black?
Just seeing this and having, the most wonderful time of the year being played in the background, it just kind of was like, yeah, that's kind of cool. So I don't know why that, but I mean, it looks like a cool series. So,
a friend of mine pointed out the fact that in Age of Ultron, Hawkeye is sort of self-narrating at varying points during the movie, and very much like John McClane does in Die Hard. It's like, I think we're gonna get some Hawkeye self-narration in this holiday action piece, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, it's if they channel some of the fun of some of those 80s Christmas action movies, like I said, directed by Shane Black, stuff. So it'll be fun. It'll be fun, and it's it only highlights how Marvel's slowly but surely consuming everything. It's you got them at the start of the year, you're gonna get them at the end of the year with your holiday season.
It's a confession time with Aaron, but I've never seen Die Hard. Yeah, Fredo, this should be a video podcast so they could see your guys' reaction right now. I've never seen Die Hard. So
how did you skip that?
I don't know. I had Bruce Willis's album that he released in the 80s, but I didn't see Die Hard. Bruno,
Oh
what is it? The Return of Bruno?
All right. Well, Aaron, were you in... Okay, so this is my only possible excuse that I will accept for that. Were you in college at the time?
When did it come out?
88.
88?
No, I was in high school.
No? Okay. It
was high school.
Because, man, I don't know. We're going to have to rectify that one. It's going to have to become...
Homework.
Part of the homework.
And I'll get into the argument of whether or not Die Hard is a Christmas movie.
Watch it during Christmas.
I don't care about that. That's just, something for people to talk about on the internet, right? But it's... It is the greatest action movie of all time.
Oh, okay. Well, now I'm not going to see it for another 10 years. You just screwed it. There we go. You went for hyperbole. The greatest action movie
of all
time. The greatest action movie of all time.
But I'll say it's the most influential, probably of the last 25, 35 years.
Well, that's interesting as well.
Just because it became so iconic that the phrase "die hard on blank" became became everywhere. Die Hard on a Boat, you know,
All
Die
right.
Hard on a
I
Bus, The
mean,
Speed.
Die Hard
I
on a
know
Plane.
I know all the, you know, it's one of those things where Brittany and I have talked about it, where it's like, if we haven't seen something, we still understand the pop culture importance
Right, the
and
reference.
references and things like that. So now I will watch it soon. Welcome to the party, pal. Soon, so that I can come back and
Okay.
so.
There are warts. There are huge warts in this movie. Okay,
It's a ladies'
For the
movie.
greatest action movie of all
You're
time.
going in enjoying the warts. You know, they're winking at you while they're doing it. I'll give you an example. The police chief is a bumbling idiot who you're going to be throwing things at the screen because you're like, this guy is the dumbest idiot I've ever seen in my entire life. McClunky, this guy. But they're doing that on purpose. You know, it's just the trope. And they're playing into the trope, and you're like, okay, it's fun. It's fun.
Don't try to save it. Don't try to save it for me, guys. I'll watch it. You've said your piece. You've said it's the best action movie of all time, and you've said, Fredo, that it's the most influential of the last about 25 years.
Whatever years. Yeah.
All right,
30 years.
I will watch it with I will watch it with an open mind. You know, and we'll
just get ready for all the 80s guys that you know from other movies to show up in this one.
It's the definition of an action movie. Like, there are other things, you know, you've got like the comic book movie, you've got, you know, the sci-fi.
Now I will say,
got all these other genres.
My
right?
mom has seen it, and she loves it.
Action movie. This is what this is. Action.
So okay, so I will watch it. Like I said, you know, Aaron's mind needs to be, you know, broadened. So let me ask you one more thing, and then we got to get onto our topic for tonight. But you guys were geeking out a little bit over the new Batman trailer, and I guess my question is, why? I mean, it looks fine. It looks good, but it looks like, well, how is this going to be different than any other Batman movie that we've had in the last, you know, 20 years plus? Because so it's like we see a coffee cup with the Riddler, you know, sign. It's like, well, we've had the Riddler, now it's Jim Carrey, so what, we're going to get a different Riddler, you know? And then so we've got, you know, so why is this? And I'm not trying to be a jerk about it, but I'm, you know, you guys can maybe help some people along as to why they should be excited about this reboot. Go ahead.
Well, two things. One, you're right. It's very surprising how quickly we're coming with a reboot after the character got rebooted under Ben Affleck. I think in part, I mean, there was always this interest of doing one of the seminal Batman stories is Batman Year One by Frank Miller, which is how Batman, it wasn't just Batman's origins, which everybody has seen, but it's the idea of how Batman became Batman. We got some of that out of Batman Begins with Christopher Nolan back in 2005. This one's actually going more into some of those details, some of those quirks, how Batman's kind of discovering how to be the character Bruce Wayne. Matt Reeves, the director, is a really good director. If you've ever seen 10 Cloverfield Lane, his adaptation of the Let the Right One In, Let Me In. He also did the last two Planet of the Apes reboots, Dawn and then War for the Planet of the Apes, both really good. So he's got a really good sense of that. And also, I like the aesthetic that they're going for in some ways. It's not comic, you know, yes, it's a comic book movie. Yes, it's a Batman movie, but it's leaning more towards the psychological aspect of Batman. And I've always been surprised that we don't get enough.
Take issue with you, just
Batman. We get a lot of punchy guy Batman. We get a lot of tech gadget Batman. We don't get enough of the detective, the guy who can actually solve crimes kind of Batman. I'm hoping this one is.
I will take a little bit of issue. I mean, the aesthetic of it looked, I mean, you could have been looking at, you know, a trailer from Batman Begins or, you know, Dark Knight. I mean, it has that same, there was a very similar aesthetic to it.
They're more leaning into reality as opposed to the Joel Schumacher look, which leaned more into the over-the-topness of comic books.
Right. Yes. You know, that is a danger of these, because unless you are, I mean, if you're steeped in the comic book lore, then you know that it's going to be like, okay, this is going to be based on this comic series. People just the dumb people like me, it's like Batman. But you know, but you know, unless you know that there was this writer in this series of the Batman comics that the movie is going to be based on. There's this series that this movie is going to be based on. So each gives a different take. Cool. But like I said, I just don't know if that trailer did anything to tell me that it is different from, the Christian Bale stuff.
From the other ones you've got, right? Dave?
Yeah, that's probably a fair critique of the trailer. I mean, like, I didn't watch the trailer and say my excitement has, gotten stronger or waned either. It was just sort of
Waned.
there.
Ha.
Ha. Yeah, you see what I'm doing there. It was fine, but to your pointer, and it's like it's not telling you much. It really is not, and it's not telling you that you might be looking at year one, like Fredo said, and you might be looking at these detective noir roots that we barely touched on in any of the other movies. You get a little bit of that with Keaton. Hardly anything else. I mean, I guess a little Bale, and it's just they sprinkle it in, but they don't do a lot of it. And so, like, this is really going to become test your wits, right? And so, like, that's part of the appeal. The other part of the appeal for me personally is just the fact that they're stuffing this thing so full of characters. Is that going to work?
Well,
Like,
it's getting like the when you had the Riddler and Two-Face and who else was all involved? Was Poison Ivy in that one as well?
No, she was in the last one. She was in Batman and Robin.
Anyway, you're right. You get too many. It becomes like the '60s, Batman when you had all the villains in the submarine. Yeah,
which could be a good thing. I'm not gonna like rule it out. You know what I mean? Because it's just we haven't seen it in a long time. At least not that. We've only seen it like fail spectacularly. We've not seen somebody pull it off.
right.
So, like, I'm kind of excited on that level too. It's like, okay, can you make this work? I'm interested to see if you can make it work. And so, like, that's another reason to kind of be drawn towards it.
So the franchise had to take a turn after the supercut of Justice League, the recut of Justice League, and the minute I heard Joker say, Batman was going to give him a reach around, that made me go, what? So I'm anxious to see a different Batman movie. So we don't.
You know what? I'm a little upset that DC and Marvel seem to be following the same playbook right now, which is like the multiverse stuff. Which, like, they're both sort of falling into that at the same time. We're seeing it in the new Flash movie. Oh, look, it's the Batman you remember from before, but it's like, how is he here? And we have this other Batman over here, and this Joker is different than this other Joker, and they're just like throwing them all out there, and they're not really explaining it yet. But now they're going like the multiverse route, maybe. I'm not excited about all that. I guess I'd rather they just kind of had a more direct path.
So that was.
I will say.
Oh, go ahead, Fredo.
No, I was just gonna say, and it's that was one of the mistakes that DC kind of jumped into to quickly try to build a shared universe. And I thought that after the success of Wonder Woman and Shazam and Aquaman, particularly, that they had learned kind of the lesson that okay, we need to start focusing on making one good movie, then another good movie, then another good movie. And as we string good movies along, then maybe people want to come along and we can expand that into a universe or a multiverse. Again, Marvel's had 15 years at this, and only now we're getting different variants and whatnots. Right. And they're introducing that slowly. They're not running out to show it to you. So,
and I'm sorry to take us down a tangent from our topic for this evening, but that just remember you guys mentioned that, and that trailer did come out. Like I said, it looks cool. And yeah, so but I just wonder what it would make different from any other Batman movie.
More good movies is a good thing.
So Star Wars, getting back to Star Wars, and how the sequels has changed our view of the original trilogy. And when you guys proposed this topic, the first thing I'm gonna steal one of the bullets that Dave, did you put this up? But it was the first one that came to my brain, is that Palpatine has more weight in the story than just the evil ruler of the galaxy. And I think it even affects when they're talking about the Emperor in A New Hope. You know, it makes a bigger. It. I mean, he is a much bigger deal. I think that's the first glaring thing. Sorry, just that's us jumping right in the deep end of the pool. And a lot of people had the big criticisms, like, really, Rey is Palpatine's granddaughter? I might have been one of them. Um, but I mean, it makes him um, the Yang to, Anakin's Yang. That sounds dirty, but is what it is.
I would, yeah, I would agree with you. I think in some ways it juxtaposes the two sides of the story that I've been watching along for all these movies, where you get the Jedi who are all about embracing and accepting the ebb and flow of life. Life will end at some point. There is a journey through death that we'll have to take care of, and we shouldn't begrudge it or try to stave it off. Whereas every time we see Palpatine, all he's trying to do is gain that ultimate power. That's his ultimate goal. He wants to live forever. That's the carrot he dangles over Anakin. And you think, well, when he gets thrown, at first you think, okay, he gets killed at the end of Jedi. But then seeing that the entirety of the sequel trilogy wraps around back to that idea of no, he was still trying to find ways to live forever, whether it was a clone son, a granddaughter, transferring, whatever. Um, it shows you just how deep and desperate his need was to stave off the Grim Reaper.
And if somebody hasn't done it yet, they need to do like a parody of it was Agatha all along, it was Palpatine all along. It's like, I mean, basically he's writing this entire story from episode 1 through episode 9, right? And you're right. I mean, we see the Emperor in holographic form in Empire, and you're just thinking, okay, yeah, Vader calls him his master, but I guess I didn't really put him into this, okay, he's a Sith Lord type of a mind. I didn't have that role in his head. Looking back to 1980, and then in Return of the Jedi, when he shoots, lightning at Luke, we're like, okay, something's up.
Oh, I'm afraid the deflector shield will be quite operational when your friends arrive.
More of a bad what than we thought. Then, I mean, the prequels really establish him as Sith. But then the sequels, you're right, it's like I said, it is just, he's kind of the glue that ties everything together. Dave?
Yeah, and I think like what's interesting is to think about his relationship with the Skywalkers. There's that meme that goes around, I think, where it's Anakin in Dooku's throne room with Obi-Wan laying on the ground and Palpatine sitting in the chair, and it says Anakin kills all of these people. And which is, if you think about it, is kind of true. And also, if you think like he sort of killed himself too by death by lightning. But it's like Anakin and Palpatine were always sort of like connected, right? Connected, and that was one of the things that George did, I think, really smartly in the prequels, which is like, let's hint at it in the first movie. Let's show a little bit more of it in the second movie, and then we'll try to pay it off in the third. And by the time you get to the original trilogy, now these two people are just the two big bads, right? The big bad and big bad A. Mm-hmm. And so there they are together. And so then and now Luke gets folded into the equation, and then the events play out as they do. Now you fast forward to the sequel trilogy, and whose galaxy is it at this point? Like Snoke's.
Well, and that's my thing. I'm going to interrupt you here because that's my thing. I wish, if that was actually the story all along, I wish we would not have had Snoke. I wish they would have brought in Palpatine from the get-go. Like maybe when you have Luke on the cliff, then maybe the next scene the Emperor's cackle, so I don't know, something. But I wish he was part of the story the whole way.
Or just have him be the guy on the throne that Kylo's talking to, and you're like, what the heck?
Yeah, explain it later.
Or do like a little solo thing where you see this cloaked thing and you're like, I recognize that voice. And it took me a while to figure out it was Maul, because it was, what's his butt's voice from the Clone Wars. But anyway, so now I think Palpatine's voice would have been recognizable immediately. But I mean, yeah, I think that, or he maybe didn't even have to say a word. Could just been Kylo talking to this cloaked figure, and you're like, who is that?
Or you could have put him into a, I don't know, some kind of a suit like Vader had, or Kylo had, where that modulates your voice.
Sure.
And then you don't have any idea that way. So, but yeah, they probably could have hinted at the reveal without revealing it if they wanted to, or they could have just have him shown up, because like they did that in the ninth movie. Mm-hmm. It was like, he's back. We don't know how or why, but he is.
Yeah, right.
They could have done that in 7 if they really wanted to.
That's like that crawl had no skills. That was like going up to the girl at the bar and go, "You're pretty," So another thing that came to my mind when I thinking about the sequels to the original trilogy, and it's kind of interesting that I'm going to say this, but the idea of the Force has more weight as well. And actually, I think the prequels kind of almost demystified the Force, because everybody was using the Force all over the place. And, when Obi-Wan was talking about it in episode 4, and then the first time you see Luke moving a lightsaber in Empire, but what the sequels did was to bring that mystic quality back, especially when Maz Kanata's talking about it and Rey is discovering it, not knowing what this is that's going on. I think that affected me, and the way I look at the Force through it, because whereas the prequel trilogy, I think, demystified it a little bit, I don't think that the original trilogy gave it enough weight, as to what it was, but they were trying to figure out what it was.
I don't disagree with that. I also like that. I think you're hinting at something even potentially broader, which is this idea of paying respect to what came before too. And they do that by kind of elevating the things that pre-existed, right? The Millennium Falcon is really, really important. Again, the fans have put that importance there. The producers of the original films put that importance on it. But we're gonna take it up a notch. We're gonna Guy Fieri this. We're gonna make it even bigger. Or wait, Emerald, right? Yeah, no, that's an Emerald thing. Sorry, but like we're gonna make it even bigger and even more mythic, and we're gonna hint at more of a backstory that you don't know about necessarily. And they did that with Luke's lightsaber. Like you said, they did that with the Force. Like reestablish some of the mysticism and the awe of it. Like, we don't fully understand everything, but we respect it, and we're going to kind of like put it on this pedestal. Like Kylo literally puts Vader's helmet on a pedestal. Mm-hmm. Like that's a sequence we see. There it is. It's on a pedestal. So it's like that's a very deliberate image to convey what they're trying to achieve there. And again, like, I understand the marketing sales side of that. I'm not going to repeat that, Aaron.
I just thought a 4-year-old virgin when you said that. It was funny as hell.
Yeah, no, but I talk about you don't want to talk about pedestals. That like college football head coaches. Okay, like that's my thing. You'll get me ranting for 2 hours on that. But yeah, no. So like, there's this whole mysticism and this whole we respect what came before thing. And again, part of it's the sales side of it, we really want to get the fans back in the seats.
Well, but then you
But I also feel like it resonated. It worked. I liked
well, and
that way they treated
and
those
that's the
things.
thing is that people were like peeing their pants because Luke was doing this force projection thing that actually Ryan Johnson took out of a book about the Jedi. First of all, so we see that's like, wow, this made the force bigger to us. And then they introduced the idea of a dyad, in the Rise of Skywalker, which people pissed their pants over that too. Sorry, you're gonna have the McClunky that's all over the place. But it's they freaked out over that. But it's like it made the force bigger and the possibilities. It's like, I mean, come on, folks. The Wright brothers, flew the first airplane, and then what it was like 60 years later, we were flying to the moon.
Yeah.
I mean, so. I don't know. Like I said, I like the fact that they made. So when Obi-Wan is now talking about this in the original trilogy, it's like we now know all these things are possible.
I think in part, one of the things that, as you guys were talking, I was thinking about, part of the job of the prequel trilogy was sort of to demystify a lot of the stuff that we saw in the original trilogy, because it was to show you what came before. So, whereas before you had the, just Obi-Wan's speech to Luke on Tatooine, we were going to get to see all of that. We got to see all of that and more. The world that they grew up with the Jedi being a presence in the galaxy, with the Republic and the Senate and everything. And in some ways, the sequels is showing you the going forward after the Empire, that a lot of the stuff has gotten lost and is being refound. And that's where they're almost trying to find the balance as to the romanticism of the original trilogy versus the kind of stark, cold reality that the prequels kind of have to show you, that, yeah, there were thousands of Jedi and they were all floating and jumping and lightsaber left, right, and center. And, this is no longer the case, because there's only how many Jedi by the start of episode 7? It's only one, and he's on an island. And there's one guy who proclaims to be Sith, but he's not really Sith. So uh, it has to go that way. But I think what it does is it allows you to kind of go back and take a look at it and see the journey, kind of how in history, kind of how stuff gets lost during wars and then gets refound later on. And people have to put that past into its proper context. You can't make the Jedi out to heroes. That's why the lesson that Luke gives to Rey and Ahch-To about how the Jedi bought their own hype and they're the ones who let Palpatine come to power, because he's not romanticizing the Jedi. He's telling you this is who they were, both good and flawed.
So I'm gonna give my next 2 points in one, because you just mentioned Luke. Another thing that the sequels has done, and this is in a positive way. It makes me look at Han Solo and Luke Skywalker much differently. And first of all, I love Han Solo's arc from episode 4 to episode 7. I mean, when he's offed, spoiler alert. I liked the way that Ryan Johnson portrayed Luke in The Last Jedi, because it makes him look a little less perfect, that we're all made to believe that he was, in the original trilogy, that he was this, innocent, can't be tempted, or can be tempted, but won't fall to it, type of thing. But it showed that he was a flawed, human being. So that is something that I think the sequels did really well, is that they really upped Han Solo and Luke Skywalker's characters.
Yeah, and they did that through the natural course of what you had to achieve with the story. It's like if you commit to bringing them back, well, you can't just leave them in their happy ending at that point. We have drama to achieve here in these new movies. I'm sorry, we need drama. So it's like, what are we going to do with them? And we're going to tell the story of aging. We're going to tell the story of legacy, and what it is about them and what they thought they achieved and how they came up short. And We're just going to swim in those kinds of details, and you're going to, by extension, learn much more about who those characters really are.
Let's put this into a real world context for a second. I mean, at the end of Return of the Jedi, it's like we see, we're thinking Luke Skywalker is going to go on. He's going to train the new Jedi, and he's going to bring everything back, and everything's going to be skippy. Whoopoo! We, yay, we win. Okay, so let's go to the real world right now. 2 years ago, LSU wins the national championship, and Ed Ogeron is like the greatest thing since sliced bread, and LSU is on the move, baby. And homeboy's looking for a job now. You know what I mean? And it's like your time in the spotlight is limited, folks. And Luke had his time in the spotlight, and something happened to make him get out of that spotlight. So for Luke, the Luke part of it, that's what. But the Han part of it, I love the fact, like I said, and it all actually in episode 9, I think one of the best moments was when Kylo doesn't say it, when Ben doesn't say a word, and Han says, "I know." I mean, that just like Han Solo is now he's he's finally kind of put a bow on the person he was meant to be. So.
And I think in some ways, I mean, we said it back when the prequels were coming out that, and fans were getting upset. It's like, there's no way we can have sequels if everything went hunky-dory for our heroes from the original trilogy. Like, there's no way it could have all gone according to plan, and yet here we are back fighting the same villains. So there had to have been stuff to go wrong, which I also think it's a very good lesson in terms of historical aspect. Just when you study history and you see people, whether it's, historical figures that we look back later on now, we're like, oh no, they were flawed human. They were not all 100% heroic. That's people. The struggle against the dark side, to put it that way, is one that gets fought on an everyday basis. That's part of Luke's tragedy in episode 8, is the fact that he flickered just for a moment. He had a doubt just for a moment. And in that moment, everything collapsed. It's the fact that when everything fell apart for Han and Leia and their family, they couldn't put it back together, and they ran away back into who they were. So that's part of the dynamic that I think a lot of folks, it's weird. It's some younger folks rejected, some younger folks accepted, some folks our age totally rejected because that's not our Luke. They're all hanging on to what we saw at the end of Mandalorian season 2. And I'm like, yeah, but the Luke on Acto is still coming. The tragedy is still on his way. It's not just because he beat the bad guys does not mean that there's not going to be any more sad days. And it's good that that's a lesson that got passed down by the sequels, because that does happen. You think you're the hero and invincible one day, and next thing it's like, nope, I screwed up, and now things are worse than ever. You're not infallible.
I also want to say that his end and the way that it was handled in episode 8 reinforces the sacrifice that he made at the end of Return of the Jedi, and I think it does it beautifully. And so it's essentially, for me, again, everybody mileage varies, I get that, but like for me, that moment of pacifist resistance, I'm going to stand up for what I believe in, but I'm not going to like shoot force lightning at your head or whatever, or blow up a planet. It's like, I'm going to just stand up and give these other people a chance to thrive and live and fight another day.
The last Jedi said what Yoda taught him, that the Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense. You're right. Luke is not an aggressor.
And so like that whole character side of him just gets reinforced, and I think it's beautiful. And when I go back and I watch the original trilogy now, like that's still kind of in the back of my mind. It's just like, Luke, you're a good egg. You're not perfect, but you're a good egg.
I'll never turn to the dark side. You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
So now
he's someone who tries to do the good thing, and he struggles with it like we all do.
Dave, you had another one on here. and about we now have 3 arcs rather than just 2, obviously. Um, and after you make that point, I want to bring up something that ties into that. So what's your point here?
We covered this on one of our early shows, which was, well, like, what's the point of the new sequels? And I think, like, with taken within the context of the other trilogies, you have the fall in the first film, or the first 3 films. You have the redemption in the next 3 films after that, and then the last 3 films deal with legacy. And so if you're trying to look for a connection point, if you've struggled, as a lot of people have, to kind of say, like, what was the point of these last 3 movies, in terms of the saga, um, that's kind of it. And it really is reflective in pretty much all of the characters that you see. They're either trying to assure a kind of legacy for themselves, or they're trying to live up to a legacy that's been left behind by others.
No, the thing I was going to bring up was listening to Star Wars Underworld podcast. Dominic Jones brought up a good point. He said what he thought would be kind of a cool idea is if there is a next trilogy. And actually, I'll morph it a little bit. And wouldn't it be cool if they would have done this in 7, 8, 9 instead of having just a 30-year jump? If they would have done a 1,000-year jump. And like I said, this was his idea. This isn't my original thing, but so then you have somebody who maybe comes to find out that they are descended from Palpatine or descended from Luke Skywalker. Does then that become a little bit easier to swallow than what we got in The Rise of Skywalker, where everything is, you don't even have to play 6 degrees of anybody. You play 1 degree of, so, but if you put that 1,000 years in the future, then it's like somebody who's all of a sudden shooting down a transport with lightning hands. And they're like, where'd this come from? And they make a connection to the Force. And maybe that's when they, connect to Force Ghost Palpatine or Force Ghost Luke or whatever, and say, yeah, you're a descendant of this. And then they have to figure out what the Jedi were, so I don't know. It was kind of an interesting take on that. So I don't know what you guys think of that, or if we want to just move on, whatever.
No, it's an interesting idea because by stretching it out that far out, it does give it creates a different dynamic. I mean, of course, it's a different galaxy, it's a different situation. So who knows how they would have written stuff, whether there would have been something like the First Order or something else entirely together. I mean, Star Wars through across its media has shown its ability to both morph and stay the same way. I mean, we just saw in Star Wars Visions, some of those chapters were set thousands of years into the future. So you could still have the story and whatnot. I think that the downside, if there's a downside of having it done within a 30-year gap or 30-year jump, was we still had all the connections to the characters. And I think once you committed to bring the characters back, you couldn't do it 1,000 years into the future. At the same time, though, because you're bringing those characters back, you're going to be playing with the feelings and emotions of the fans of those characters. Now, you're like, wait, that's not my Luke, that's not my Han, that is my Leia, those kind of things, because it proves people build emotional connections to those characters, and they didn't want to see them in this way. They wanted to believe they got their happily ever after, and again, by nature of the sequels existing, we know that didn't happen.
Yeah, I know that Luke. Excuse me. I know that Luke is a very controversial point for a lot of fans because for some people it didn't work, and for a lot of people it did. But I do think that there was a conscientious effort in the sequel trilogy to just sort of pay the respects to what came before, and to not only just respect what had come before, but also maybe build upon it and elevate it if they could. And so I think, like, that was, again, the Millennium Falcon, the lightsaber, all these little things like that. Like I wasn't hung up on a lot of this stuff, but by the same token, I was very appreciative that they said, "Well, this is an important thing. We can wrap our arms around this thing. This is a tangible thing for a lot of people, and it is important to them." And I think like that was the one thing that the sequel trilogy did, um, as a kind of course correction from the prequels, where the prequels kind of demystified things. The sequels tried to remystify them and treat them again, put them on the pedestal. So,
But I will say one thing. There's the one character who I think the presence only grows even more now in Star Wars thanks to the sequels. It's Princess Leia.
mm-hmm.
She was one of the three main characters in the original trilogy, but I think, it got just shown the moment after Carrie Fisher's untimely passing, but her presence in the sequel trilogy, anchoring things, showing her, who she is. I think, if there was a point where she didn't have fans in terms of that character, I don't think there isn't a girl who doesn't love Star Wars who doesn't love Princess Leia.
So, another, because the alarm has gone off, but there was another point you made, Dave. I like that you said the happy ending is gone. That end of Return of the Jedi, you might as well just scratch it off, because I mean they make it seem like we're dancing with Ewoks and everything's going to be just fine, and I mean it's not long after that, and even the Mandalorian has influenced this a little bit, because it's like there's disorder. It's like anytime we see, like, a war ends in a place, forces leave, well, the United States left Afghanistan just a couple months ago, and again a vacuum is created and somebody comes in and takes power. But yeah, that whole
Yub Nub.
that yeah, you might as well not sing Yub Nub anymore. So
That's art imitating life. I mean, it really is. So it's like, yeah, the happy ending's gone. It's throw napalm on it. It's dead and buried. But it's probably a little more realistic if we're being honest with ourselves, because it's like things don't just tidy up in a bow. Think about it. There just from the EU and everything else. It's like, well, okay, well, what now? What next? What do we do now? So it's like, the hard work begins now. Now you got to rebuild the galaxy. Now you got to rebuild government. Now you got to figure out how to keep everybody happy and safe. And so, like, these are the kinds of things that were always going to be a part of that story.
So, all right. Well, I mean, anything else for the good of the order? I mean, I would say I think that the prequels probably influenced the way I look at the original trilogy more than the sequels have, because and I mean,
But I will say,
you had George Lucas writing this, and it was like he was, there was an intent there. The sequels were to get people excited about Star Wars again. I mean,
but I'll also say you've sat with the prequels for 15 years. The sequels have only ended 2 years, so we only got the whole story there for 2 years. I wonder whether we'll be feeling the same way 10 years from now. Whether the people who were positive or negative about the sequels after Rise of Skywalker will, how they feel in 2030. Just because at some point, like I said, the book gets closed and gets put on the shelf, the movie gets closed and gets put on the shelf. You have to come to terms with what it is and what the story is. And look, by that point, we'll be getting new Star Wars movies and series and whatnot. So it may be that it's always a context that's changing. A lot of people, it took something like Clone Wars to open up their eyes to everything that was going on in the prequels and get them to recontextualize them in a way they could accept them. Maybe we're waiting for that to happen to the sequels now.
So yeah, well, hit us up on Twitter or on Facebook. Let us know how the sequels has influenced your view of the original trilogy. Like I said, we stuck to a positive spin. You guys have to be proud of me that I stuck to a positive spin. But I think maybe we need to do a sister show of how it has maybe not negatively, but left, kind of, let's do the yin to the yang, right? Because there are some things that, like I said, not to be all complainy about it, but there are some things that kind of, prequels.
You ruined my childhood.
Right. Yeah. You ruined not my Star
Do
Wars.
not use the 4-letter R word.
All right. Well, yeah. Okay. Anyway,
Aaron needs another beer, kids.
Aaron's been drinking whiskey. But anyway, so cool. Well, like I said, hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, what you think, how the sequel trilogy has affected your viewing of the original trilogy. We love to be bugged at work. You guys don't bug us enough. Until then, we will say who dat?
Who dat?
Who dat?
And everybody have a great week, and we'll see you another time.
McConkey.